Hi again everybody, so I am back here today and we're going to be doing some history learning today, and you have already done a unit of history learning with Mrs. Marsden this year, and we know that in history we are thinking about the past, so things that have already happened, and our history unit this term is called Into the Unknown, and we're going to be looking at explorers. So my first question to you is, if we're learning about famous explorers, what does it mean to be famous? And what do you think an explorer is? Pause the video and see if you can explain your answer to these two questions. Okay, so hopefully you said something along the lines that if somebody is famous, it means that they're known about by a lot of people. So a lot of people know who they are and why they are famous. They're known by many people. And then an explorer is what we're going to be talking about today. So an explorer is someone who explores a new or unfamiliar place. So that means either a new place that nobody's ever been to before, or somewhere where people have discovered but we don't know much about it. And sometimes explorers are gone for a very long time because they might need to travel there. It might be on the other side of the world, or they might have to go by boat, which can take longer. So I want you to think about, what might an explorer need to take with them in their bag? What do you think an explorer might need? See if you can think of a list in your head. Okay, so you may have listed some different objects, and I've got some different pictures here to show you what an explorer might take, because an explorer could be somebody in the past from a long time ago, but people today still go exploring. So there's different things that you might have thought about that they might take in their bag. So on this first picture, they might have to take a telescope. They might need some warm clothes, something to drink from. Sometimes they might take animals on board their ship with them as well, or on their journey. It doesn't always have to be on a ship. They might need some sources of light. So explorers today would be able to take a torch, whereas explorers a long time ago might have had to have candles. Money, so today people can take credit cards, whereas before they'd have needed to have taken coins or notes with them. They might also need some way of telling the time, so they might have a watch and some food. And then I've got a picture of a sat-nav and a hairdryer. If we're thinking about explorers from the past, do we think they'd have had access to a sat-nav and a hairdryer? Wonder what you think. And then they might have also had to take some maps as well. So if they didn't have access to sat-navs, they'd have relied on maps or compasses. So they are some of the things that you might have listed that an explorer might need to take with them. And we're going to be looking at an explorer today. And this is the explorer that we're going to be looking at. So I want you to have a think about these different questions. Who do you think this might be? Do you have any ideas? Is he from the past, as in, is he an explorer from a long time ago, or do you think he's from the present, an explorer today? What type of person do you think he is and why? And what can you see that he's wearing that might give you some clues? So see if you can pause the video and have a little think. Okay, so I wonder if you have any ideas as to who you think this might be, and I'm going to tell you in just a minute. I think he's probably from the past because it looks like it's a painting. There's not much colour to it, and it doesn't look like it's been taken with a camera. So I don't think he could be an explorer from the present. He looks quite important with the clothes that he's wearing. I can see he's got like a gown or a cape going across him, and he's wearing a hat. So I wonder what type of explorer he might be. So this explorer is called Christopher Columbus. Can you have a go at saying his name? Christopher Columbus. And this is the famous explorer that we're going to be looking at this term. And Christopher Columbus is a significant person from the past. What do you think it might mean if we're describing him as significant? See if you can have a think. What do you think the word significant might mean? So if we're describing someone as significant, it's another way of saying that they're really important or famous. So a significant person from the past is a famous person from history. Somebody that has made a difference to our lives today. So something that Christopher Columbus did has affected how we live our lives today. So we're going to go through some different facts about Christopher Columbus. So these are just some basic facts because we're going to do some more learning about him later on in the term. So Christopher Columbus was born in Italy in 1451. So that's over 500 years ago. So do you think Christopher Columbus is still alive? No, Christopher Columbus isn't still alive. Christopher Columbus wanted to find a new way to sail west and prove that the earth wasn't flat, because a long time ago, people thought that the earth was flat rather than round. And he wanted to prove that in fact it was flat and that it wasn't flat and that in fact it's round and that it's not possible to sail off the earth, because people thought that if the world was flat, if they kept sailing, they'd eventually fall off. And that's not true because the earth is round. He wanted to sail to the Indies to find some riches, silk and spices. He wanted to go there so that he could find this treasure. And he was an explorer over 500 years ago. So he is the famous explorer that we're going to be looking at this term. So we're going to plot Columbus onto a timeline, and we're going to be thinking about some other significant events that you have learnt about before. So I'm going to pause the video and then I'm going to show you a timeline that I have made. Okay everybody, so hopefully you can see my timeline clearly in front of you, and we're going to have a go at plotting some significant events on our timeline, thinking particularly about where we would plot the significant person that we have learnt about today, which is Christopher Columbus. So some of these different events are events that you would have learnt either at the start of year 2, when you looked at toys, you thought particularly about the Victorian era. And then you also learned about the Great Fire of London in year 1, which we know happened in 1666. So we're going to think about where we're going to plot these different historical events. Now there's one on here that really stands out to me, which I know we could plot onto the timeline straight away. So I'm just going to read them out and then we'll see if we can guess which one we could plot on first. So we've got Columbus, which we know was in 1492, Victorian era, the Great Fire of London, grandparents, now, and parents. So the one I'm going to choose to plot on straight away is now, because that is the present tense. That is where we are now, and there's nothing else that we can plot on our timeline because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So I'm going to plot now here at the end of our timeline because that is where we have got up to. So the next thing I might plot is, let's have a look. We've got grandparents and parents. Which one do you think is going to come first on our timeline? Do you think your grandparents were born first or your parents? Who do you think was born first? So your grandparents would have been born before your parents. So I'm going to put grandparents first here, and then your grandparents, and then your parents after. So we've got grandparents, parents, and then now. Let's have a look at the rest of our historical events. So what do we think came first? We've got Columbus in 1492, the Victorian era, and then the Great Fire of London. We know that the Great Fire of London happened in 1666. And we know Columbus was in 1492. So Columbus came before the Great Fire of London, and the Victorian era was in the 1900s. So we've got 1900s for the Victorian era, the Great Fire of London in 1666, and then Columbus in 1492, which was over 500 years ago. So Columbus is going to come first on our timeline. Then we've got the Great Fire of London, which was 1666, and the Victoria era in the 1900s. So which do you think is going to come next after Columbus? It's going to be the Great Fire of London. So we've got Columbus in 1492, which is over 500 years ago. The Great Fire of London in 1666. The Victorian era in the 1900s, around 1901. Your grandparents, parents, and then now. So we have placed all of the events on our timeline. Now we've got some pictures to match to some of them. I can see this picture here is showing a fire. So this must be for the Great Fire of London. Can you remember who this famous explorer was? This is Christopher Columbus. So he's going to go at the start of our timeline. And then we've got a toy from the Victorian era. So I'm going to place that there. So we can see that our timeline from start to finish, we start with Christopher Columbus in 1492, the Great Fire of London, the Victorian era, which you learnt about when you looked at toys, grandparents, parents, and now. So your activity today is you are going to create your own timeline and plot these events on there, and there is a worksheet on the website for you to do this. Okay, so now we have plotted these significant events onto the timeline, thinking specifically about Columbus. If Columbus was alive over 500 years ago, how do we think we know so much about him today? What do we think we might use to find out information about why he is so significant? Pause the video and see if you can think of maybe 5 different reasons about how we know about him today. So some of the different ways that we might know about Columbus today is from drawings. As I mentioned earlier, when we looked at the picture of Columbus, they wouldn't have been able to have been taken with technology like cameras or cameras on people's mobile phones or on an iPad. They'd have all been represented through drawing about what they think he looks like. Museums, so being able to find out information or artefacts from this time period. Newspaper articles from this time. Perhaps letters that Columbus might have sent or been exchanged about the topic at the time. From books, information books telling us about him, or artefacts. And we know that an artefact is something that gives us information from a historical period of time. So your activity today is on the website there is a timeline, and then you've got the same captions and pictures that we used when I created my timeline for you, and you're going to have a go at plotting them onto your timeline. So I hope you've enjoyed our history lesson today, and I will see you again tomorrow. Bye!